imagined. We imagined a place where people can come to not only get resources, but a place where people can come to learn and share their experiences and knowledge with others. In a unique partnership, the City of Lafayette and the Lafayette Community Foundation have worked for more than 10 years to bring a new 21st century library and learning center to Lafayette. But how does one accomplish this in this less than stellar economic times? Lafayette City Manager Steve Falk spoke on how learning was the key to the library complex.
We heard people say that the education needs to go beyond the schools, that we should be a community that promotes learning not just at Happy Valley School, not just at Stanley School, not just at Acalanes High School, but learning for all generations. And that's how this library can be distinguished.
In terms of families and children, I can't imagine a community being without access to a decent library.
What an amazing gift to allow people the access to this kind of knowledge.
The library, I think, is so important, so important. So whenever Lafayette decided to get a new library, I was so excited about it. We need it desperately here.
Desperate need only begins to describe the Lafayette Library situation. The building was built over 40 years ago and housed a collection of about 15,000 books. That has grown to where there are over 65,000 items as part of the library's collection. Technology has also changed the needs of the library, along with inadequate parking, study rooms, meeting space, and workspace for the staff and volunteers.
And so I think that gradually people began to see that libraries were really a gathering place for the community and not just a repository of books.
I was just amazed that a town of the size of Lafayette would not have a real library, because we came from Marin County where the libraries were wonderful.
However, though many felt there was a need for a new library, many more had to get on board to make it happen. So in the year 2000, the Lafayette City Council and the Elementary School Governing Board formed a task force named Library Vision 2000. The job of the task force was to address and define the scope for a 21st century library. Based on their findings, a community foundation was formed to tackle the fundraising.
Once the need was established, a remarkable thing happened. Joan Merriman and her band of merry library workers came forward with the first pledge to the new Lafayette Library and Learning Center, and it was for $1 million.
By November of 2007, we had raised $12.7 million. If the Community Foundation was going to continue to be a true community foundation and to do other projects in the community, we would need to spin off a new organization. And the new Community Foundation launched Open Doors, Open Minds. And the Open Doors, Open Minds campaign was to be $4 million. So we all took a breath and said, can we raise another $4 million?
Not only could the new foundation raise $4 million, they went ahead and dramatically changed the whole concept of the library campaign.
You need to bite off a chunk that, in whatever project and whatever size, that is just beyond your reach, just beyond your grasp. And we do it over and over again, and it happens in the poorest neighborhoods, and it happens in the wealthiest neighborhoods. It doesn't happen in many other countries where there's a very small nonprofit sector. It just doesn't happen where government is providing the services.
Public-private partnership We have both public money, a wonderful state grant, and then matched by very generous private money.
This fundraising is, it's a combination of an art and a science, because you have to really have a plan and follow it, and that's the science part. But you have to believe in what you're doing, and that belief is contagious.
One thing that made this library possible was getting the state library grant. And we were not the likeliest candidates to get a state library grant because we have a library, we're a community that has resources, we could raise some money. There are communities that didn't even have libraries who were applying for these state grants.
The California Public Library Construction and Renovation Bond Board was the organization that Lafayette appealed to for additional funds for construction of the library. However, the steering committee knew that just an ordinary branch library was not going to get the attention of the state officials.
I suggested that we call it the Lafayette Library and Learning Center. That this would imply in the brand of Lafayette Library and Learning Center that this wasn't just another branch library, but this is a place where extraordinary things could happen.
But just what was this learning center idea going to encompass? It had to be something big and far-reaching.
Originally we thought, well, we needed to have partnerships with the schools. And then I can recall the day we were sitting in the conference room at the city offices, and Roger Falcone, who was on the school board, and who also happened to be at that time the chair of the Department of Physics at UC Berkeley, kind of wondered aloud. He said, you know, I think perhaps we should expand the concept of our partnerships to include organizations beyond the schools.
And for many years I had worked with the Lawrence Hall of Science. I chair an advisory committee to them, and I knew that they were very important to our schools. So I said to the group, why don't we bring the Lawrence Hall of Science in on our library? They would love to bring program out to us. They already produce books and science texts that our teachers use and hands-on activities, but maybe they had a bigger role they could play.
And that is when the big bulb went on. What if we were able to assemble a consortium of great nonprofit institutions from the region that would become the Lafayette Library and Learning Center Consortium?
Bob Fisher took this idea and literally ran with it that night. He drafted an email to Gwen Lennox about the idea, and from that point on, this really began to move. With Bob Fisher's contacts with the San Francisco Foundation, 12 partners were brought on board to form a consortium.
I think what worked was, first, we had a phenomenal project. So the idea that no one had ever done this kind of library with a learning center, with 12 partners from these amazing Bay Area organizations. Being on the ground floor of a concept like that, I think inspired a lot of people.
It was Steve Falk who had the next big idea. We've been looking for ways to honor Glen Seaborg. Bob, could we talk to David Seaborg with Ann Groden and others to see if the family would support the use of the family name, thinking that the Glen Seaborg Learning Consortium would be a powerful brand.
And they were just very, very touched by this idea. They recognized the importance of Dr. Seaborg to Lafayette and to the world. But they asked for one thing. If you could find space in the new library for a very peaceful garden, maybe with a Zen theme, we'd like you to add that to the library building program. And that's the Seaborg Garden at the Lafayette Library and Learning Center.
Once the concept of the consortium was added to the library's overall theme, the committee knew that Lafayette could be a contender for a California Library State Grant.
But on behalf of the Commonwealth Club, we decided once we committed to being part of the Glen Seaborg Learning Consortium, which is attached to the Lafayette Library, and which is really path-breaking. There's no other library in the country which had set out from the beginning, before the building of the new library, to have a group of organizations committed to being part of the teaching and learning process that would go on in the library.
So what the committee presented that day in Sacramento looked good, but nobody held his or her breath on that day in late November 2004.
Near the close of the day, we made the presentation. In fact, I spoke, and we only had about 3 or 4 minutes to make the presentation, and I had been scripted and had been rehearsed by all the other people from Lafayette, and we made the presentation, and well, I thought it went pretty well, but I wasn't sure. And then the vote came, and so they selected out the winners, and they were giving away this $1 million, that $1 million, and Lafayette was nowhere.
Said, you know, they really are doing this very unusual thing. Let's give them a shot at getting it done.
But at the very end of the day, they were able to put together a package of a small community that had never had a library, of a refurbishment of a branch library in San Francisco, and Lafayette. And the person who did it on the board was very clever, and well, that just ate up the final dollar that they had to distribute.
And the crowd went into a frenzy, at least our little delegation did, along with the other 15 or so cities that had received grants. And I can recall the most distinguished people in Lafayette, that staid, gray-haired people jumping up and down in a frenzy as if we had won an Olympic medal or something.
Yes, because people said, okay, well, the state believes in this. We got to help.
Now things began to move into high gear. The donations and additional help were welcomed as the citizens and business people of Lafayette got behind the library project.
And it's not so much a matter of how much money you have when you come to the table with your expertise. It's, I think, that esprit de corps of joining a team and pulling up your sleeves and coming up with plans and ideas and being part of that.
You know, it's exactly that. People make it happen, and you can have the idea, but you have to have the heart to move it, I think. And you know, just over and over again, the tribute of what that means as individuals coming together.
Contributions, volunteers, and ideas all helped to make the library possible. But prior to all this, the location for the new library was a prime consideration for the committee.
So we had the mayor, we had the city council, we had a lot of interested community members, and we're walking around town, maybe 20 or 30 people, looking at places. Up to St. Mary's Road, off Moraga Road, down Mount Diablo, never quite sure where we could acquire the land. And it became clear fairly early on that the site of the Veterans Memorial Hall was going to be a wonderful location.
We knew that if we could find a good site for the Veterans Building, that would then free up this ideal site for the new Lafayette Library. We had a conversation with our county supervisor, Gail Alkema, about the county's willingness to participate in a deal that would move the veterans from their dilapidated old hall where the men couldn't even, disabled men couldn't even go to the bathroom, and put them in a new building. And so this was really a delightful and I think very good moment for the Lafayette community, that we could build this magnificent building for the veterans who served our country during an important time in history, and this was a great way we could honor them and at the same time acquire really what's the best site in town for this new Lafayette Library and Learning Center.
As the details for the new site were being worked on, the library committee had proceeded to call for competitive designs for the new library and learning center. After public voting and several public hearings, the City Council overwhelmingly voted to go with a small Southern California firm named Killefer Flamang. Although Southern California-based, the firm had roots in the Bay Area and understood the architectural needs and desires of the community.
And it's going to just be this wonderful, beautiful too, and very environmentally correct place that for the first time is going to give Lafayette a sense of a center and of a heart. And I love that.
Well, you know, the thing that's amazing is that thanks to Roger Falcone and Bob Fisher on getting in on this idea of collaboration early, we were able to design the building and build spaces with input from our partners. So the art and science classroom can be used for frog dissections, or it can be used for pastel, classes.
Once groundbreaking took place and construction progressed, the hundreds of volunteers and workers stepped up their awareness and fundraising projects, which included Asian arts and cultural celebrations in conjunction with the Chinese New Year.
And I think Lafayette has a willingness to embrace people from different perspectives. Oh, the Power of Youth campaign was and still is a much beloved element of this new library. And so 2 initiatives came out of that. The first initiative was a summer campaign called Hometown Heroes, where children would self-identify what they wanted to do. It was kind of that entrepreneurial effort. And then the other initiative was a used book sale. And we consulted with our friends of the Lafayette Library, a lot of them senior women who've been doing this for many, many years. And they worked with teenagers and middle schoolers and gave them advice on how to do a used book sale in terms of pricing and which ones you pitch and which ones you keep. And then those books were collated and put by categories and sold at the Lafayette Art and Wine Festival. We've raised $20,000, and it involved, I think our count was 900 children in Lafayette.
A number of social events highlighted the fall of 2009 as the library was having the finishing touches applied. Rainy days and nights didn't deter the many hundreds of volunteers and workers from having a good time and getting ready for the big opening day.
Great day, incredible product here.
It's pretty darn wonderful.
Let's get started, follow me.
It is absolutely unbelievable.
Beyond imagination. I'm overwhelmed. I've probably cried 12 times.
Scale of 1 to 10, this is a 12.
We've created something that very few communities have, and we've done it through community involvement.
This shows you what can be done, and it's a living example, and it's alive. It really is an alive place.
And the diversity of people using the library, that's what's truly amazing.
It takes time to build consensus.
We don't want to hit a single or a double here. We need to hit a home run.
And the Lafayette Library and Learning Center and the Seaborg Learning Consortium in many ways capture those values that make us very special.
So I see the Learning Consortium, especially taking place in the library, as very important for the community in Lafayette.
It's really not about who's doing it, but it's about accomplishing something.
I'm proud of the citizens that contributed to that and made this thing so great and so possible.
Selfishly, I've had a blast.